Hello and welcome to the Vertue Podcast. My name is Shona Vertue. I don't know if this topic really needs much of an introduction because we'll all have our individual and yet also collective experiences of grief. But grief is still very fresh in my life, and I imagine it will be for quite some time because it's just a void that can't really be filled, or at least the cause of the grief that I'm experiencing, the loss of my mum, is not going to be filled, actually. And I think I have come to, or each day I come to accept and honor that reality. And yet, there's also been a lot of gift to how I've experienced grief. And I wanted to talk about it. And this podcast, I hope, is going to be useful to you and offer respite and at the same time offer a sense of curiosity about the possibilities that grief can bring about. And without being too mysterious, I think I'll just let us get on with the podcast. So thank you for being here. And I also want to say, just have a pen and piece of paper next to you if you're listening to this in a place where it's possible for you to write down some things, or maybe just have your notes app ready so that you can write some things down. Not so much facts, but just I ask a lot of questions. We've got some journal prompts in there, and some of the things that I say will bring some stuff up for you that I think will be really helpful in unpacking stuff for you personally, even though they are obviously general questions. And if you've never been here to this podcast before, I just want to say welcome. Slightly bittersweet that we get to meet on this topic. So I do hope that you will also go check out some of the other topics that I have as well. I hope that they help you with not just the health of your body, but just the overall health of your life so that you can get more out of it and experience more out of it. And that's the main objective of the Vertue Podcast. For those of you that are back, welcome back. I'm stoked to be back, and let's get into this topic. Grief is not something that we just get over. It's something that we learn to carry. And whether you've lost someone recently or many, many years ago, whether your grief comes like a wave or a massive thunderstorm, this episode is for you. And today, I really want to talk about grief, not just the science, not just the psychology, but the feeling, the body ache, the time warp. And I also want to talk about the way grief can carve out space for love to rush back in. So what is grief really? I'm not about to send you and share with you a definition of grief because this podcast isn't a textbook. It's actually more like an exploration. So because of that, I'm going to ask you right now, what did it feel like in your body when you first lost them? For me, despite knowing that mum was not in a good way, I actually still felt so shocked. I wasn't expecting her to die that day. I was actually set up with Ayana and her toys just surrounding me because I was going to spend the day in the hospital with mum and baby so that she could feel us and not feel alone. But I actually think that not feeling alone was what helped her to actually go. Anyway, eventually when I realized that she wasn't technically alive, it felt like this invisible tourniquet wrapped around my whole being, and not to restrict me, but to actually hold me together. And I was sad, but I could feel her kind of holding me up. And it wasn't actually until a few weeks later that tourniquet started to kind of dissipate and I didn't feel her presence. And that's when grief really started to move through me. Basically, I started to feel like I couldn't feel her as much anymore. There was just this time when I really felt her there, and then it just sort of felt like I could feel her if I called on her or meditated on her, but it was a bit different. So let me share some quotes that really helped me. Grief is love with nowhere to go. It's the sound of your nervous system trying to find them in the room and failing. Grief is love's shadow. It's the echo of connection after loss. And I think all those quotes are really helpful for me, and they came to me at times when I needed them most, and that's another beautiful aspect of grief, is that it, for me anyway, felt very synchronistic in many ways. You may have also heard grief described as the sort of 5 stages, right? Like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. But I think real grief is not linear. It's almost like a loop or a spiral or a fog or a cloud. And I think that grief is wherever love was, and now there's space. And so if you're grieving right now, it means that you loved, and that love doesn't just disappear. It actually just changes form. And that is the reality of our existence in this universe. Every aspect of our physical reality and experience is constantly changing, and the only constant within that change is our perception. That's the only part. So suffering, according to many, many Eastern philosophies, is when we try to stop that change, or when we try to hold on to something, hold on to a physical experience of something. And actually, the better that we get at learning to accept and even embrace change, well, the closer we get to releasing the suffering that grasping was causing. So again, if you're grieving right now, it means that you loved. And that love didn't disappear, it just changed form. So I do want to explore a little bit about how grief affects the body. All of our emotions are experienced by our body. Grief is no exception. However, in our society, grief is labeled as a negative emotion, and I can understand why. It doesn't feel very nice. However, what many of us have been taught to do with our negative emotions is to immediately cut them off, and more importantly, distract ourselves from them. And this can often cause like a backlog of emotion that sits somewhere down in our body. So I want you to imagine this right now. What if someone you respected right now, maybe it's even the person that you lost, said to you, or they put their hand on your shoulder and they said, "It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to cry. You're not letting anyone down. You're not failing. You're allowing that energy to pass through you like a wave. There's nothing to solve right now. You're just sad. Maybe you're scared, you're angry, you're frustrated, and these emotions are not just valid, but they can actually be the catalyst for a deeper connection to life and the direction that we want to take our lives." And I'm going to come back to that. If you have barriers around crying or a resistance to it, here's something that I think that you might be interested to know. So tears actually come in 3 types. We've got the basal, reflex, and emotional tears. And each has a different chemical makeup. Basal tears they're just always present. They keep our eyes lubricated and protected. Reflex tears are triggered by irritants like onions or smoke, and they're mostly water and enzymes that help to flush the eye. Emotional tears, however, they are chemically unique. They contain higher levels of stress hormones like cortisol and prolactin, as well as natural painkillers. So emotional crying can actually help the body to regulate stress and bring relief, not just physically, but emotionally too. So please, please, please don't hold back tears. I get that sometimes it's impractical, but it's okay to let them out. And sometimes I find that if I just let them out when they're small, right? When I have that small urge, I don't have to do big, intense crying later. I just let the emotions surface and move through me without judging it or telling myself that it's wrong or I should be over it by now. And even sometimes when I'm meditating, that wave of emotion comes up and I just allow it, even if it disrupts me from the meditation. So let's move on to how grief affects the mind or our thinking. So grief can feel like you've forgotten how to be you, or at least that's how it's been for me. It hijacks memory, attention, and definitely time. It's not just sadness, it's actually like a disorientation. You might feel like you're kind of underwater watching life continue around you. You might also feel a little bit numb, kind of like you're wearing like noise cancelling headphones, but also like vision cancelling glasses, taste cancelling mouthpiece, not that that exists, but basically it kind of feels like all your senses are a bit turned down. And I know that's me talking about the body, but this then starts to play into how we think. Like our cognitive abilities start to become distracted by this numbness. And when we look at the research, this actually makes total sense. When we're in deep grief, especially in the early stages, brain scans show changes in 2 key areas of the brain. The anterior cingulate cortex, which is involved in emotional regulation and decision making, and of course, the amygdala, which plays a very big role in how we process fear and sadness and threat. So in simple terms, this means grief doesn't just affect how we feel, it actually changes how our brain works. And that's why things like making decisions, concentrating, or even remembering simple tasks can feel overwhelming when you're grieving. And I want you to just hold on to this point when I tell you a little story a little bit later. For some people, when grief becomes prolonged and it doesn't ease over time, it can actually develop into what's called prolonged grief disorder. PGD for short actually shares some symptoms with depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. These symptoms are things like intrusive thoughts, emotional numbness, difficulty sleeping, and this deep sense of disconnection from life. So it's really, really important to remember that this doesn't mean that there is something wrong with you. It means that your brain is adapting to a loss that it can't quite process yet. And like any wound, that just takes time. It takes support, and sometimes it's going to take professional help to heal, just like you would like a physical body injury. Grief is not a state, it's a process. And like any process, it takes time. So another thing I want to talk about with grief is that there are definitely different types. There's the grief that you see coming, like a very long, drawn out goodbye. And then there's the grief that just kind of blindsides you, like a phone call, a car crash, just instant. And with Mum, I experienced the first part. I experienced what I call anticipatory grief several times, actually. She had a few really bad prognoses, and she just fought and won these incredible battles with reality. Like her defiance to stay alive with sheer positivity and at times a real unwillingness to accept doctors and medical professionals' kind of not so much advice, but the reality that they were trying to carve out for her is what kept her alive time and time again. And anticipatory grief was really hard for me because although I wanted to show some of it to Mum and like share it with her so that she knew that I would miss her, I also didn't want to disturb the reality that she was trying to live. So imagine like the last few days or months with the people that you love and they're all just sad all day. Right? Like one of the best things about being around babies is that they see you as they see all of life, which is full of opportunity. It's vibrant, it's new, it's like it just calls you into the present. And in the present, before someone has died, they are alive. And so I wanted to create a space for Mum that felt alive and exciting right up to the very end rather than sad. But this meant that I had to cry in private. And I had to hold a lot of it in my body and push it down. And I also had to hold it in a special part in my brain. And I really think it showed up in my inability to do just normal stuff. Like throughout the days, like I would get through one lecture. I don't know, any of you following me on social media might have seen that like some days, and this still happens today, like I just can't even bring myself to post. And it's not because I don't want to. It's like there's just this block. And in the midst of anticipatory grief, that was really, really prevalent. Whereas now with grief and the grief of losing Mum, it's felt like I can share that with you guys, but I just didn't, I found it really hard to share the anticipatory grief online. I found it hard to share with anyone because she was still alive. It was almost like I felt like, well, why am I complaining about this? Like she's still here, like just be present, live in the present, like Mum does, like Ayana does. And it meant that I never truly allowed myself to release it. And that means that it's got to show up somewhere else, right? So it started to show up in how I did day-to-day tasks. I just found my productivity was like turned down, and I found that my ability to obtain, retain, and then even like synthesize information, I honestly don't even know how I got through university in that last year because it was really hard. I almost think now that Mum has passed, if I had to do that last year or last 2 years again, I feel like I would have been able to do it better because it's almost like the grief has happened and I'm like, okay. And so now I'm like, it's okay to be sad some days and I can just put that to the side and I can ask for help. And I don't know, there was just something really gaslighting about it. So if you do have people around you that are going through the anticipation of death of a loved one, and I mean like imminent, like obviously we're all going to experience that at some point, I would say try to show up for them in a way that is without having to necessarily honor the reason that they might not be as effective as they normally are. Like There's no need to necessarily draw attention to it. Like, have you really thought about the fact that that person's going to die? Like, I don't think that you need to say that necessarily unless they feel like they want to share. But I think that just helping them with mundane tasks or things that just seem like really not cooking them a meal or cooking them several meals or whatever it might be. It's just like help them with stuff in a way that doesn't necessarily draw attention to the fact that you're helping them because they have someone in their life that's going to die. Maybe this doesn't apply to everyone, but it certainly applied to me. The other type of grief I would say is sudden loss, and it rips you open before you can even begin to prepare. And I've experienced this with friends who have chosen to end their lives, and it is absolutely gut-wrenching. The only way that I've been able to explain it is that it's like a bomb going off, and then everything is blurry, and then there's like a ringing in your ears, and maybe your body, like it can't physically move. And the closer you were to the impact zone, the longer it takes for you to kind of recover your senses. Now, I'm lucky to live in a country where I haven't yet physically experienced that. So I guess I'm kind of making reference to things I've seen in movies and documentaries and effects and things like that. But it's how it felt for me, and it's how many of you have described it to me as well. And so my advice there is, please respect the time your body needs to recover first. After that bomb goes off, like, you're not getting up and just running, right? You have to wait. You have to wait. And if you weren't near that impact zone, you have no idea what someone who is going through. And this is why I hate this timeline kind of pressure on the processing of grief. We just have to allow it. Especially when it's a shock. Now, saying that, I do think that there are things that we can do that prevent the blockages from occurring in our body over time. So what I mean by that is, in a world where we can really distract ourselves so much and so easily, we are putting emotional processing on the back burn. And eventually it has to surface. So while I'm not going to rigidly say to you, like, if you're going through shocking grief, like, make sure you do these 3 things every morning and don't scroll on social media and don't, just like throw all that out the window. But I do think it's important to have tools that you visit daily as a means for just maintaining that energetic flow of emotion, because it is a process, right? So it's fine if you want to doom scroll, but see if you can do it after that nature walk. So if you know that there is this habit to want to, pick up social media or binge watch a show to like just allow your body to do nothing, that may be exactly what you need. But I would just say, like, make a promise with yourself, like, I'm going to give myself permission to do that. But before I do that, I'm just going to do this one thing. I'm just going to stand outside and take 10 deep breaths, because what we don't want to do is like have this tight feeling in our body and it's like begging for us to like let it move. And instead we just try to put this new layer on top of it, which is watching something or distracting ourselves or whatever it might be, or alcohol or drugs or whatever. So all of those things are just blocking the grief's desire to move through you. So I'm not telling you to not do them. I'm just saying, almost like habit stack them, like kind of go, okay, if I want to watch TV or if I want to do this thing that I know that I'm kind of using as a little bit of a drug, I am going to choose to do something very small, very easy. Like, it doesn't have to be like, I'm going to walk 10K steps before I pick up social media. Like, that is probably really unrealistic, particularly when you're in that point of like shock and you're in that close to that impact zone. But I think 5 breaths before you do, and standing outside or standing close to a window or allowing the sun to hit your face or something along those lines is going to be so much more beneficial than not doing anything at all, or the other end of the spectrum, trying to do too much. I want to talk about grief as a gateway to more conscious living. I want to do so with the preface that not everything happens for a reason. Not everything has to be turned into some positive or benefit or, oh, I'm really glad that happened because this happened. Because maybe 10 years down the track, you're going to retrospectively look at it and be able to make something positive of that time. But like, hindsight's 2020. It's very difficult in the moment to be like, yeah, that's, I'm going to look back on that with a sense of joy. Like, we can only process what we can in the moment. So I'm sharing this as a retrospective tip, or as a a possibility, but I don't want it to be something that, again, is used as a way to kind of to gaslight yourself from actually truly feeling the rawness of the grief. I don't want to paint it with positivity. I don't want to paint your experience with meaning if that's not where you're at right now or ever. However, in my experience with mum, and not so much with my friends who I've lost to suicide, but that was very much their journey. But definitely with mum, I have found it as an opportunity to, and with a bit of sweetness as well, to embrace life more fully and more in a much more present manner. And I almost wish I had this information when she was still alive. And I wish I had this lesson when she was still alive, because I just feel like I would have been different. And the gift of anticipatory grief was that obviously I was able to use some of that to make me be with her more, to make me really put my phone down, really be present, ask her questions, go on that holiday that we kept putting off, although we still did that towards the end. Anyway, I keep kicking myself for not going to Fiji with her, but as Justin says, just you did as much as you possibly could at the time. But it has also taught me about how I spend time with Ayana and how I spend time with the people that I love. I want to really be there with them. And that's because of the grief. I would not have learnt these lessons. I would not be as present as I am without the grief and the gift within this grief. So I am really serious about this. I know that not all of you listening right now or watching are going to be in that place where you can go, oh, well, glad they're not here anymore, because now I'm going to make sure that, I know that that's not possible. And if you'd said this to me in the first few moments of mum's death, I just would have been like, this is an impossibility. I wouldn't have even heard your words. So I do understand that. For those of you that are in a place that can handle this, I'm going to ask you this question. What if grief isn't just pain, but actually it's an invitation? An invitation to live deeper, that we can only access through pain. To say the things that we usually save, to hug longer, to wake up to this very moment. And many people that I've worked with say that grief made them braver, softer, more present. So with that, I thought I'd share a few journal prompts for you to explore this a little bit more. Again, no rush, no pressure to do this, obviously. What has grief taught me the most about what I value most? What parts of life feel more precious now? How can I honor the person that I lost through the way that I live today? And what love is still with me even though they are not? If you want to take a moment to pause this and write some things down or just contemplate, and then come back to the podcast when you're ready, or maybe you're just going to no, okay, this is something I'll come to when I am ready to actually ask and face those questions. I can't leave this podcast on a positive note, even though obviously that was a moment to reflect more positively about the experience of grief. So instead, I want to talk about the power of movement for grief. And I think when words fail, the body can really speak. And again, movement is not about getting over the grief. It's about letting that grief move through you so that it doesn't become stuck. It's that stagnant feeling that makes us sick. So here are a few things that I think are really powerful. They're also evidence-based. Sometimes the evidence doesn't reach us for these things. So while I have drawn on the evidence to talk to you guys, and I always will and I always do, there are some things that are really very difficult to find scientific evidence for. And therefore, it's an exploration of the self. You have to just do it. And it is very anecdotal. Walking in nature, we do know chemically is incredibly beneficial for us. It's definitely beneficial during grief, but it's beneficial at all times. Because of this, it can impact our cognition in a positive way. It can help us to experience endorphins when those endorphins are probably quite low during that grief process. it's also just very regulating on the nervous system. And therefore, that time in nature is going to sometimes just do things that, while your thoughts and the content of the thoughts won't change, you will leave feeling that you have a perspective shift, or maybe you have a slightly lighter way of approaching that same content. That's the phenomenon of spending time in nature. Yoga is incredibly powerful for grief. And I do have some sequences on my YouTube channel for grief specifically, also for anger as well, if that's something that you're experiencing, meditation for anger, movement for anger. These things are, I want to say, not equal in their efficacy. And so I would just approach things with, I don't want to say caution, because that's not the right way to approach necessarily anything, but definitely approach it with a sense of awareness and an openness for the fact that sometimes our body can be in such a stressed out state that the moment we move even just a small amount, it immediately comes flooding. The other thing that's important to remember about movement in general is that movement can be a stress on the body. And so if it is not gentle movement, and you're one of those people, myself included, that like to gravitate towards like difficult movement, and you're doing it as a distraction, but your nervous system is super stressed out, you have to remember that hard and intense movement is a type of stress on the body. If you're already experiencing stress from your nervous system, you're already in a weakened immune state, adding extra intense exercise, yes, it may distract you temporarily from your thoughts, but how much are you going to be able to heal, and how much stress are you placing on your immune system if you are exercising while in grief? It depends on the exercise that you're choosing. And so therefore, I would say do a block period of slightly more gentle movement. Prioritize some zone 2 training over HIIT, definitely. My gosh. I wouldn't approach true high intensity interval training while you're deep in the midst of grief. If you are coming out of grief, then maybe one intense session is going to be beneficial in a week. Again, this is very personal, highly, highly personal. I haven't been able to come across any data that says like, definitely do this post 6 months and you'll be fine with this. So you just have to come to what is right for you. I can only give you the facts around your immune system, your nervous system, and then make inferences about how we're going to respond based on those facts, based on those things that we know about how our brain is functioning, how our body is functioning. And so it's not wise to throw more stress on an already stressed system. That being said, a little bit of stress, like a walk or some yoga, certain types of yoga, breath synchronized movement, are actually going to replenish you rather than deplete. And that only asterisk that I want to say around yoga is that some of those yoga positions are incredibly releasing. So you may find you have an intense emotional response during yoga, after yoga. And so if you are close to that impact zone, and if you are close to the time of that impact, then I would just let someone know, like, hey, I'm going to do some yoga, or can you pick me up after this yoga class? I'm not sure how I'm going to feel, and I'm a little bit scared to get home. I mean, maybe some of you are like, what? That sounds ridiculous. Those of you that gaslight yourselves, like I have. But I have known clients to have such an intense emotional response that they just couldn't get home. You really have the potential to have like really intense experiences, and it's important to honor that. To get really specific, the yoga postures that I would stick to close to that grief experience, so both in time and impact zone. So if you're close to the person, very close to the person, and so grief is really hitting you right now, but it's also only a short time between the time that you've lost them, I would definitely say stick to postures that are forward folding and that are restorative. Stay away from, just for a period of time, back bends and any really intense, rigorous sun salutations. Try moon salutations instead. And I'm not saying that forever. I'm just saying that in those initial periods. And again, I can't give you an exact time zone, but I would say just be really gentle with yourself. Like, don't go searching for a backbend class, because backbends are incredibly opening. They're opening into that heart space, and they're also very stimulating. And remember that your nervous system is already highly stimulated and potentially stressed. And so to do something like a backbend or a backbend class, an inversion class, any of those sorts of things, too stimulating. And you may already be like experiencing some insomnia as well. And it's just best to stay away from things that could put your body in a compromised position while you're also cognitively quite drained. So stick to restorative postures, inversion practices or postures that are restorative, like legs up the wall, things that are going to rejuvenate your body, and forward folds so that you feel this sense of kind of coming into the body. And those are going to be very helpful in those initial stages of processing and releasing. And then after a few weeks, maybe a few months, depending on how intense the emotional experience is for you, you can start to progress to slightly more intense practices and classes and see how they feel. And just know that some days are going to be better than others. We know that it's not a linear progression. And last but not least, when it comes to the body, the things that I want to say are you don't need a special routine. So even though I've just offered you like special postures to stick to and things like that, sometimes the best thing for you right now is just to stick to the basics that are really manageable and small so that you can ground yourself. Things like hydration, going to bed at the same time. So it's really common to like let yourself stay up and get into that doom scroll. But if you can honor at least even the practice to just go to bed, get yourself ready for bed at the same time, wind down. Even if you still find yourself in a state of insomnia, you still find that you can't sleep, the effort to remain consistent around trying is going to create a sort of framework of routine within your life that will help maintain this metaphorical structure when you're in the midst of that chaotic storm that is grief, or that grief can be. And so I just want to leave you with this notion that grief is messy, grief is beautiful, grief is terrifying, and it's truly proof that you loved. And in the space it leaves behind, something else can grow. And maybe it's not going to be joy, at least not yet, but it's definitely going to be presence, connection, and a deeper you, which will allow you to connect with others more deeply too. And I just want to say that it has allowed me to connect with those of you who are also experiencing grief in a really deep and meaningful way, be it messages on Instagram, be it emails, be it people I work with, seeing people in the street who have known mum before. Like, these connections are ineffable. It's hard to describe them. It's hard to describe how beautiful. The loss of mum has allowed for me to connect with other people. And it's so frustrating to say that, because sometimes I just want to say to mum, like, oh, this person reached out and, I didn't even know this was happening for you in your life and your day-to-day. And so it's bittersweet. So thank you if you have reached out to me about mum or about your own experience. I really appreciate it. And thank you for being a part of this podcast community. If you found it helpful, please share it with someone who you think will benefit from it. And I can't wait to get back to talking to you about creatine and menopause and fitness and spot reduction, any of the things health and fitness related. Thank you.